Hey everyone, welcome to Growth Rising. I'm Bird. If you've been here, you know that we've been talking about the planets going in retrograde. And when a planet goes in retrograde, it appears to be going backwards instead of forwards, even though technically the planets won't stop and go backwards. It just appears that way from us here on Earth's point of view. And excuse me, when a planet is going retrograde, the energies are strong, and it's also when the planet is closest to Earth. And so we've talked about Mercury going retrograde, which is very frequent. You always have multiple a year. We talked about Venus going retrograde, which Venus will go retrograde this year, starting in July. And now we're going to talk about Mars going retrograde, which Mars just came out of retrograde in January. Yeah, in January, because there was a brief period earlier this year whenever all of the planets were direct. And so a couple of things about Mars going retrograde. Okay, for one, we know that Mars is the planet of drive and passion and war, action, all of that good stuff. Well, depends on how you look at it. So, first, we are going to go over if you are born with Mars retrograde. And then we're just going to talk about a couple of things if well, for whenever everybody is affected by the Mars retrograde. So first, with the Mars retrograde, if you're born with it in your birth chart, you will see, well, you might experience troubles, well, issues with being assertive. You may, how everybody else might, be able to go ahead and say whatever it is that they feel, or are able to be assertive, not necessarily mean, but just assertive. You might have a little bit more trouble with it just because your Mars is not really cooperating with that. You'll also have internal battles. So you'll have a lot going on internally because, Mars is, the planet of war. So you will experience some of that internally. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. And I am so sorry, y'all. But and also you will have a tendency to hold some of your feelings back. You, like I was saying, you won't be as quick to be assertive. So some of that you'll hold back, and that pressure will start to build up. Like you can have like a lot, you can be going through a lot for days, weeks, months, however long, and all of that will start to build up because you're not letting it out whenever it needs to be let out. So whenever someone might just say one little thing to you, you could just snap on them. And it's not that you're trying to be mean, rude, disrespectful, however you see it. It's just that all of that pressure has been building and building and building, and it got to the point that you exploded. So, yeah. And also you'll want to get things that seem impossible. You'll want to get that kind of stuff done, which it could look good for your accomplishment because Mars is all about passion. Well, action. Well, passion too, but it doesn't really fit in this sentence. But Mars is all about action, and so you'll want to get some things that seem impossible done. And if you do, keep going by that action, you will get it done. You just have to stay on yourself to get it done because, for one, your planet of action and all of that is in retrograde. So do be a little cautious of that. You will probably also think a lot about some of your past experiences because here we are with another retrograde planet. It won't necessarily have to be negative experiences, but something that you experienced in the past. So that's a couple of things to, you know, you might see if you were born during the Mars retrograde, like I was, which, growing up, I know personally I did have issues with being assertive. I would always stay quiet. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers because I would always think about whatever consequences it may lead to, and I didn't want anything to lead to any consequences with my name tied to it. And I used to be that kid who would let all of my anger and frustration build up, and then I would get to the point where just one little thing would make me pop. I remember one time I popped or exploded when we were in a restaurant or a store. I was with my family. And then on top of that, I was like 12, 13, something like that. I was still pretty young, but also going through puberty, and it was a lot. But, having that history already of holding stuff in and just letting something pop, yeah, I did. And it was not nice. And it has happened multiple times. I have gotten better though about, letting whatever be known when it needs to be known. Just like, if you were born during a Mars retrograde, the same thing can happen with you. You can start to work with these different, planets in your chart, to the point where it's not hindering you, but actually helping you. But a couple of things to keep in mind with a Mars retrograde for everyone. One thing that I remember hearing a lot during this past Mars retrograde, was to not get a tattoo. But Mars was also retrograde in Gemini. So, but like to not get a tattoo, stay away from needles, sharp objects, do not play around with them if you don't have to, fire, none of that, because you want to stay safe. So just take the eye you want to, but you just want to be more cautious than not. Oh yeah, and excuse me, during a I'm sorry, during a Mars retrograde, you may also have a bit more issues with relieving stress, because you can get a lot more stress built up, or anger, or whatever it is. It can build up faster. So do try to do things that are relaxing to you. Even if you have to do it for like an extra 5, 10, even 30 minutes, trust me, it will definitely be beneficial. And also be very careful of getting into any kind of confrontations or arguments with whoever in your life, depending on where Mars will be retrograding in your chart. That's where you want to figure out, what do you have to look for, and what do you want to try to avoid, and what do you want to start to recognize. Like with Mars going retrograde last year in Gemini, let's say Gemini is in your 10th house, which is the house of your public self and your career. So you'll have to look out to make sure that you wouldn't be getting into a lot of arguments at work, or if you're famous, with, fans or trolls on the internet, stuff like that. And also, you could also feel passive also, so do keep that in mind, because it is still going retrograde. So you could either be one extreme or the other, and it also depends on what other planets are close by Mars while it's going retrograde, and if you have any natal planets or angles. It's a lot of stuff that does go into it. But with Mars going retrograde, you could get into a lot more arguments, or you could be a lot more passive. I do know with this past Mars retrograde, um, the thing about arguments was very high for a lot of people, and I was able to see it. Yay. Well, I don't know if that's a yay, because that's kind of negative, so scratch that. But you could also feel passive, and according to the Astro database, for as of 2020, there were 8.93 charts that has Mars retrograde. So, that is kind of small, but it does go retrograde a lot less frequent, and it goes retrograde for a couple of months. But yeah, that's just some of the stuff about a Mars retrograde. And if any of it resonated with you, just comment down below and let me know. Thank you and have a good day.